You've seen Meghan Markle smile on camera. You've seen her poised at red carpets, perfectly coiffed, perfectly dressed, projecting the image of grace under scrutiny. But what if I told you that behind the cameras, away from the public's gaze, she wasn't calm or charming at all? What if there were moments captured that no one was supposed to hear, moments that would shatter the carefully constructed image of composure? You might think this is speculation, a rumor spread by tabloids, but the truth is far more shocking, and it's all documented in audio secretly recorded on set. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine walking onto a holiday-themed Netflix set, the lights twinkling, a Christmas tree sparkling in the background, the aroma of freshly baked cookies filling the air. Everything seems magical, perfect even. The crew is buzzing with excitement. Cameras are set. Props are arranged meticulously. The script for With Love, Meghan, holiday celebration is flawless, or so everyone thinks. And then it begins. A subtle sigh, a muttered complaint, a glance that could freeze anyone in their tracks. At first, it's barely noticeable, but soon, the tension becomes palpable. And then, the first words are shouted. Words so sharp, so charged, that they leave everyone on set frozen, unsure how to respond. What you are about to hear, or rather, what the crew secretly captured, is not something you'll forget. Audio exists of Meghan allegedly shouting obscenities, lashing out at staff, throwing tantrums that rival anything you've seen in reality television. But this wasn't a scripted moment, a dramatic flair for the cameras, or even a planned segment of her cooking show. This was raw, unfiltered, private behavior. Behavior that could potentially alter public perception, media narratives, and the Netflix brand itself. Now, why does this matter to you right now? It matters because the world has been fed a carefully curated story about Meghan Markle. A story of elegance, charm, poise, and sophistication. Millions of viewers have tuned in to watch her holiday special expecting warmth, festive cheer, and a star who embodies grace under pressure. But behind the scenes, there's a different story. A story that has been intentionally hidden until now. Leaks like this don't just entertain. They expose the discrepancy between public image and private reality. And the timing is critical. Netflix is already facing declining viewership and scrutiny over production costs and creative decisions. The last thing they needed was unflattering audio capturing a star in an unexpected meltdown. So how did it all happen? The crew members were under strict non-disclosure agreements, as is standard for productions of this caliber. They were instructed to maintain decorum, to be discreet, to ensure that nothing off appeared in the final cut. But human behavior is unpredictable, and hidden tensions can simmer unnoticed until they explode. The audio was reportedly captured secretly, a few devices tucked away, possibly by crew members fearful of being caught in the crossfire, or by staff who felt the need to document events they knew could later be of public interest. No one expected the recording to ever see the light of day. And yet, here we are. The first signs of trouble were subtle. Meghan was reportedly frustrated by timing issues, by misplaced utensils, by staff failing to anticipate her directions. Small complaints, murmured under her breath, escalated over the course of filming. The crew initially dismissed these incidents as minor frustrations, typical for a high-pressure environment with a strict filming schedule. But soon, the whispers became audible criticisms, and the criticisms became commands delivered with sharp, unmistakable anger. And then came the shouts, the moment the audio captured her alleged meltdown in full force. What makes this story particularly shocking isn't just the content of the outburst. It's the contrast between what the public sees and what actually happens behind closed doors. Meghan Markle's public persona is carefully managed. Every interview, every appearance, every social media post is curated, polished, and designed to project an image of control and elegance. Yet this audio, captured secretly, allegedly reveals behavior that contradicts that image entirely. It's a stark reminder of the pressure, the expectations, and sometimes the volatility that can exist behind the glimmering facade of celebrity and royalty. The reactions on set were reportedly intense. Crew members, unsure how to respond, froze in place. Some tried to soothe the situation. Others maintained professional distance, watching events unfold like stunned observers. There were reportedly moments of disbelief, moments where seasoned professionals could hardly comprehend what was happening. For them, this wasn't a performance. It was real, unpredictable, and deeply unsettling. And for Netflix executives, once they became aware of what was happening, it became a nightmare scenario, a public relations challenge that could not be ignored. But there's more to the story than just the meltdown itself. There are whispers of legal threats, of crew members discussing whether they could safely report what they heard, of concerns about personal and professional ramifications. The tension on set reportedly escalated beyond what anyone anticipated. There's a delicate balance between documenting behavior, protecting yourself legally, and maintaining professional integrity. For those who captured the audio, that balance became a source of anxiety and fear. For the viewers who will eventually hear portions of it, the tension becomes a shocking revelation. So, what exactly did the crew hear? We can't repeat every word here, but reports suggest there were repeated instances of shouting, cursing, and pointed criticisms aimed directly at staff members. These were not playful jabs, not moments of humor, not scripted lines. They were allegedly spontaneous, raw expressions of frustration that left everyone on set stunned. And yet, the story doesn't end there. According to sources, this is only the tip of the iceberg. The audio is said to contain moments of extreme intensity, moments that reveal not just frustration, but emotional vulnerability, moments that may reshape the public's understanding of Meghan Markle as a personality, both on and off camera. Now, imagine yourself in the crew's position. You are there to ensure a flawless production, to anticipate every need, to execute every detail without error. Suddenly, the star of the show begins a tirade that you cannot ignore, and that you know is being secretly recorded. You might freeze, you might retreat, you might try to reason with her, but in that moment, the dynamic of the set shifts entirely. What was meant to be a joyful holiday production transforms into a tense, anxiety-filled environment where every step could trigger another outburst. The psychological stakes are enormous. And what about Netflix? The streaming giant is no stranger to controversy, but even for them, the potential fallout is significant. Not only could public perception of the special change dramatically, but corporate accountability, crew morale, and internal reporting procedures are all on the line. Decisions must be made quickly. Do they attempt to contain the situation internally, issue statements, or hope the incident never becomes public? The implications are staggering. You might wonder, why now? Why is this audio surfacing at this moment? Timing is everything. With Netflix facing competition, with viewership numbers fluctuating, and with the public's insatiable curiosity about celebrities' private lives, the release of behind-the-scenes audio has the potential to capture attention like few other stories can. And for Meghan Markle, whose every move is scrutinized, the potential damage to her image is immediate and undeniable. By now, you may be asking yourself, is this one meltdown or part of a pattern? Was this an isolated incident caused by pressure and fatigue, or does it reveal a deeper side of her personality that we have never seen before? The crew's accounts suggest that while the audio captured a single intense period, it may reflect broader tensions, frustrations, and dynamics that occurred throughout production. The stakes, the contradictions, and the drama are why this story matters. It's not just about celebrity gossip or a holiday special gone wrong. It's about the intersection of fame, pressure, human behavior, and the fragile line between public image and private reality. It's about the truth behind what the cameras usually hide. And the audio, allegedly captured in secret, promises to reveal details that could shock even the most devoted fans and possibly reshape the narrative around Meghan Markle's professional conduct in a highly visible, high-stakes environment. So, as we dive deeper into this story, keep in mind the questions that hang over every scene. How did the crew cope? How did the executives respond? What exactly was captured in the audio? And how will it affect the public's perception? And perhaps most importantly, what happens next in a production where a star's private outburst threatens to unravel the carefully scripted world of Netflix holiday cheer? And just when you think you have a handle on the events, just when you think you've imagined the worst, remember, what was recorded goes far beyond what anyone expected. The first few minutes of audio are only the beginning. The escalation, the reactions, the consequences, these are the parts that will shock you. that will challenge what you thought you knew, and that will leave you questioning how much of celebrity is performance and how much is reality. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Glittering lights, festive wreaths, the scent of cinnamon and pine drifting through the air. Cameras were meticulously positioned, strategically angled to capture every smile, every flower-dusted hand, every perfectly orchestrated stirring of a bowl. On paper, with love, Meghan, holiday celebration was supposed to be a show of warmth, charm, and effortless elegance. But from the very first moment the crew arrived on set, there was a tension in the air that few dared to acknowledge. It started subtly, a fleeting glance that seemed sharp, a whispered instruction that carried an edge of impatience. At first, it was easy to dismiss. After all, high-pressure productions are inherently tense. Every staff member knows that perfection is expected, that timing must be flawless, that a single misstep can ruin a shot, an entire scene, or the schedule for the day. But there was something different this time, something the crew couldn't quite put their finger on, and as the morning progressed, it became impossible to ignore. The crew had been carefully assembled for weeks. Experienced producers, lighting technicians, sound engineers, camera operators, set designers, and assistants, each one a professional, a veteran in the entertainment world. They had seen diva tantrums before, celebrity insecurities, the occasional yelling match over misplaced props or missed cues. Yet there was a unanimous, unspoken sense among them that today would be different. Something in Meghan Markle's demeanor suggested that the usual protocols would not suffice, that the polished smiles required for the cameras could not mask the undercurrents of tension on set. From the outset, the production schedule was rigorous. There were multiple scenes planned, elaborate decorations to arrange, festive meals to prepare and plate, all within a constrained filming window. Crew members moved quickly, coordinating lights, cameras, and props with precision. But as Meghan stepped onto set, seemingly radiant, there was an unmistakable intensity in her presence. She greeted the crew with a polite smile, but those who were paying attention noticed the subtle strain in her eyes. The slight twitch, the tautness in her jaw, the way her hand brushed against the counter in a movement that was almost imperceptibly forceful. The first incident came almost immediately. A tray of carefully prepped cookies had been placed slightly off-center. To an untrained eye, it might have seemed trivial, but for someone accustomed to perfection, someone whose public image depends on exactitude, it was enough to trigger a quiet frustration. Meghan allegedly muttered something under her breath, a remark so sharp that a nearby assistant caught it and felt a chill. No one on set spoke up. They weren't sure whether to respond, whether to correct the mistake, or simply to continue moving, hoping that the small misstep would go unnoticed. And then it escalated. The cameras began rolling, capturing each scene with flawless precision. But behind the lens, the tension simmered. Crew members noticed a shift in Meghan's energy. Commands that had previously been delivered calmly were now clipped, precise, and carried an unmistakable edge. Instructions were repeated unnecessarily, and minor errors became points of immediate scrutiny. The atmosphere, once professional and controlled, grew electric with unease. What many on set reportedly found alarming was the unpredictability. At times, Meghan would appear completely in control, smiling, directing with apparent grace. And then, without warning, a subtle irritation would surface, a sharp word, a forceful gesture, a pointed look that sent everyone scrambling to avoid the next verbal lash. Professionals accustomed to handling temperamental stars found themselves unsure of how to respond. Should they step back? Should they anticipate her every need? Or should they maintain their own boundaries, knowing that speaking up could provoke an even stronger reaction? Some crew members described it as walking a tightrope. One misstep could provoke an outburst, yet inaction could be equally dangerous. Cameras captured the scripted holiday cheer, but behind the scenes, there was an invisible storm brewing. The assistants whispered to each other in corners, exchanging brief glances that conveyed both fear and disbelief. They had signed on for a holiday special, not a battlefield of nerves. And yet, the tension was real, palpable, and escalating. Even the director, someone with decades of experience managing high-profile productions, felt the pressure mounting. Notes were jotted, instructions repeated, and every movement on set was scrutinized, not just by the cameras, but by Meghan herself. According to insider accounts, there was a pattern. Minor mistakes were magnified, delays were intolerable, and every deviation from her expectations was met with escalating frustration. Yet, amidst the tension, there was also a strange duality. Meghan's professionalism could be dazzling when it suited her. Some crew members admitted that she would switch seamlessly from irritation to warmth, instructing with precision while offering compliments that were almost too perfectly timed. It was a constant balancing act for the team, trying to read the signals, to anticipate the moods, to respond correctly in a situation where the rules were never clear. And then came the first audible incident. During a scene involving a particularly complex recipe, a spatula was misplaced. It was small, almost trivial, but to Meghan, it was significant. Voices reportedly rose, not immediately into full-blown yelling, but into sharp, clipped instructions that carried weight and intensity. Crew members described a sudden tension in the air, like a storm building. The cameras captured the scripted scene flawlessly, but what they didn't capture, and what would soon be revealed through the secret audio, was the verbal and emotional storm brewing just beyond frame. As the day progressed, the pattern continued. Minor frustrations became moments of intense scrutiny. Crew members began whispering among themselves, cautiously, as if speaking too loudly would provoke a reaction. The set, meant to embody holiday cheer and festive delight, had transformed into an environment of silent anxiety. And yet, everything continued. The cameras rolled, the lights shone bright, and to the public, everything appeared seamless. But behind the cameras, the reality was different. Crew members, even seasoned professionals, felt an undercurrent of unpredictability. Each instruction had to be calculated, each movement measured, each response considered carefully. And all the while, Meghan's energy, her focus, and her expectations created a tension that was almost tangible. According to insiders, this was not typical celebrity stress or a one-off moment of irritation. It was an escalating pattern, a build-up that would soon reach a point of audible confrontation, one that was recorded in secret and would later shock audiences worldwide. By midday, it became clear to the crew that this day would be remembered not just for the production itself, but for the emotional intensity that had infiltrated the set. The holiday cheer was a thin veneer over a pressure cooker environment where a single error could spark a significant reaction. Everyone on set was hyper-aware, moving cautiously, anticipating potential triggers, and hoping that they could navigate the day without incident. And yet, despite all precautions, the first true meltdown was unavoidable. It was not a moment staged for the cameras, not a scripted reaction. It was raw, emotional, and human. Captured only by the devices quietly recording in the background, devices that would eventually provide the world with a glimpse into a side of Meghan Markle that had been hidden until now. Crew members later admitted feeling a mix of emotions: shock, fear, disbelief, and curiosity. How could someone who appeared so controlled in public be capable of such intensity behind the scenes? Was this an isolated incident, or a symptom of deeper pressures? And most importantly, what would happen next, as the day continued and tensions mounted? As the afternoon rolled on, the stage was set for something extraordinary. The cameras continued their work, the script followed its course, and the crew moved with practiced precision. Yet, beneath it all, the undercurrent of frustration and emotional volatility continued to grow. Every small mistake, every miscommunication, every minor oversight had the potential to ignite another wave of outburst. And the secret audio devices, unnoticed by most, were capturing every subtle fluctuation of tone, every clipped instruction, every barely audible sigh of irritation that hinted at the storm to come. No one on set could predict the magnitude of what would occur. The tension was building like a tightly wound spring, ready to release with a force that would leave both crew and executives stunned. And in just a few short hours, the carefully maintained facade of holiday joy would be shattered by the reality of human emotion, captured forever in audio that was never meant to be heard. The day's events were a prelude, a first glimpse into what would become a dramatic, revealing, and widely discussed incident. What started as minor tension escalated into moments of confrontation and frustration that the crew would later describe as unforgettable, even traumatic. The production, meant to embody warmth and festive cheer, had inadvertently become the setting for a behind-the-scenes exposé, a revealing look at the pressures, expectations, and emotional intensity of a high-profile celebrity production. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started as a whisper, almost imperceptible, a subtle sigh that the untrained ear might have missed entirely. But those who were there knew it for what it was, a sign, a hint of what was to come. In the controlled, polished environment of a Netflix holiday special set, any deviation from perfection is magnified. And on this day, nothing seemed to go perfectly, no matter how small the error. The morning had passed with minor irritations. A prop placed a millimeter off from where Meghan expected. A camera angle adjusted slightly too late. A whisking motion not timed perfectly. For most productions, these would be minor, almost laughable errors. But on this set, with Meghan Markle at the center, they were magnified into moments of tension. A flicker of frustration in her gaze, a pause too long, a gesture too abrupt. These subtle cues were enough to alert the crew that the calm exterior was beginning to crack. At first, the crew tried to maintain their composure. They had seen celebrity frustrations before. They had learned to adapt, to anticipate the moods, to respond quickly. But there was something different this time. The usual grace that allows stars to vent their frustrations subtly was absent. Instead, there were micro-incidents, little flashes of irritation, moments that escalated more quickly than the crew expected. A dropped utensil, a misplaced ingredient, or even a delayed cue could trigger a reaction. And according to insiders, these reactions were growing increasingly vocal. The first audible outburst occurred over a simple task, preparing a decorative cake for a holiday segment. One assistant had placed frosting slightly unevenly, a deviation so minor it would have gone unnoticed by anyone outside the production team. But Meghan reportedly froze, her eyes narrowing. A sharp tone was audible to those nearby, a reprimand that carried an edge of intensity. It wasn't a full meltdown, but it was the first signal that the day was no longer ordinary. What was particularly shocking to the crew was how quickly the mood shifted. One moment, Meghan was engaged, demonstrating her technique with a smile, giving small, encouraging instructions. The next, a slight misstep, a spatula not held at the correct angle, a misaligned plate, would trigger a pointed comment delivered with unmistakable force. Crew members described the feeling as walking on eggshells, where every action had to be precise, measured, and anticipated. One wrong move, one missed instruction, could spark another wave of frustration. Even seasoned professionals on set began to notice patterns. The frustration was not random. It followed certain triggers. Anything that deviated from her exact expectations seemed to ignite the response. Some staff members speculated that the pressure of the show, combined with tight filming schedules and public scrutiny, was compounding. Others believed the reactions were more personal, a reflection of Meghan's personality when she felt challenged or misunderstood. As the morning progressed, minor incidents accumulated. A mixing bowl placed slightly off-center, a napkin unfolded incorrectly, an ingredient set down a second too late. The staff tried to adjust preemptively, reading her body language, trying to predict what might provoke irritation next. But with each successive correction, the feedback grew more intense. What started as subtle frustration evolved into sharper, louder expressions of displeasure. Crew members described it as a tension that hung in the air, palpable and unavoidable. One of the most striking aspects, according to multiple sources, was the contrast between Meghan's calm, poised demeanor in front of the cameras and her private reactions. To the public, she appeared charming, graceful, completely in control. Off camera, however, she was reportedly less restrained. The audio captured moments where her voice rose, where instructions became commands, and where the subtleties of irritation turned into outright frustration. These weren't casual remarks. They were verbal explosions that left the crew unsure how to respond. The tension had practical consequences as well. Filming schedules slowed, not because of technical issues, but because staff were trying to navigate the emotional landscape created by the star. Crew members reportedly communicated in whispers, sharing quick glances, signaling small corrections without speaking too loudly. Every instruction had to be weighed carefully. How would she react? Would she notice? Would she escalate? Interestingly, some moments of frustration were punctuated by brief flashes of warmth or encouragement, which only made the unpredictability more challenging. Meghan might sharply correct one mistake, then immediately praise another action, leaving crew members on high alert. This constant oscillation between tension and reassurance created a roller coaster environment, where every task required heightened awareness and emotional agility. The first few hours of filming, initially expected to be smooth and productive, had instead become a study in micromanaging human behavior. Crew members reported feeling both admiration for her technical skills and anxiety about her reactions. Each misstep, no matter how small, was a potential spark for another outburst. And with every escalation, the secret audio devices in the background continued to record, capturing the tonal shifts, the clipped words, the rising tension, all of it unseen by the cameras capturing the polished, public-facing footage. What added to the drama was the cumulative effect of multiple small frustrations. Each incident alone might have been manageable, but layered together, they created an atmosphere of heightened anticipation and emotional strain. Crew members began speculating among themselves about how long the tension could last, whether it would build into a larger confrontation, and how executives might respond if they became aware of the situation. By midday, the pattern was clear. The subtle sighs and micro-expressions that had begun the day had escalated into full verbal corrections. Crew members described the environment as unpredictable and tense, a far cry from the holiday cheer intended for the special. And while the cameras continued to roll, capturing flawless footage for the audience, the reality behind the scenes was entirely different. A production staff walking a fine line between professionalism and self-preservation, trying to navigate the emotional volatility of one of the world's most famous personalities. Even small technical delays, lights taking longer to adjust, cameras needing repositioning, ingredients arriving late, became flashpoints. Each incident was a trigger, each trigger a potential escalation. According to insiders, the intensity of Meghan's reactions grew with each successive incident, creating a compounding effect. What started as subtle irritation evolved into more assertive, louder expressions of frustration. The secret audio recordings, unbeknownst to most on set, captured every inflection, every clipped command, every rising pitch. And yet, for all the tension, there was a strange professionalism among the crew. Despite the unpredictability, they continued to perform their duties, anticipating each potential flashpoint, adjusting behavior in real time, and documenting the chaos as it unfolded. Some whispered among themselves about the absurdity of it all. Others worried about potential public exposure. But all of them agreed on one point. This was unlike anything they had experienced in a production of this scale. What made the situation even more extraordinary was how quickly it was building toward a breaking point. Minor frustrations, amplified by the stakes of a high-profile Netflix production, were creating the perfect conditions for a dramatic outburst. Crew members were hyper-aware, executives were starting to notice unusual patterns of behavior, and the audio devices silently recorded every moment, preserving evidence that would later shock the public. And just when the crew thought they had adapted, just when they believed they could anticipate her reactions, the intensity reached a level that none of them had expected. Voices raised. Instructions became more forceful. Gestures became sharper. The air was electric with anticipation. Everyone could sense that something significant was about to happen, a moment that would define the day and set the stage for revelations that would reach far beyond the set. The first signs of frustration, subtle and almost imperceptible at first, had escalated into a clear pattern of tension and emotional volatility. And as the crew watched, worked, and waited, the question hung over the set like a storm cloud. What would happen when this pressure reached its inevitable climax? But what came next would push the boundaries of expectation, and no one on set was prepared for the storm that the secret audio would eventually reveal. It started as a murmur, barely audible over the clatter of utensils and the hum of lights on the set of With Love, Meghan, holiday celebration. Crew members exchanged furtive glances, whispering in corners, not daring to raise their voices. Something unusual was happening, something that no one had expected. And yet, at that moment, none of them fully realized the gravity of what was unfolding, or that the moments they were witnessing would soon be preserved forever in secret audio. The production had been running for hours, each segment meticulously planned and executed. The cameras captured polished scenes, Meghan smiling as she decorated a gingerbread house, laughing lightly while stirring a decadent chocolate ganache, perfectly poised as she presented her holiday table. On screen, it looked flawless, but off-screen, the story was entirely different. Crew members described a growing tension, an energy that had shifted from mild frustration to something more intense, more volatile. It was during one of the mid-morning shoots that the first whispers of the audio began. A few crew members, concerned about potential confrontations and wanting to document the behavior, had discreetly activated recording devices. Some had small, inconspicuous microphones. Others used hidden recorders attached to laptops or smartphones. Their intent was not malicious. It was a mix of caution, fear, and the instinct to protect themselves from escalating conflict. They wanted a record, not for public consumption, not for gossip, but as insurance. As the day unfolded, it would become clear just how prescient their decision had been. The first recordings captured moments that were startling in their intensity. Meghan's voice, calm one second, could spike with sharpness the next. Commands became clipped, criticisms sharp and pointed. Minor mistakes, like a utensil placed incorrectly or a mixing bowl not aligned perfectly, were met with audible frustration. Crew members, listening to the playback later, described a mix of shock and disbelief. It was unlike any behavior they had encountered from a celebrity of her stature, someone so publicly polished, so carefully composed. What made the recordings particularly significant was their candid nature. Unlike the cameras, which captured only what was intended for public viewing, the audio recorded the unfiltered reality. Every sigh of exasperation, every clipped command, every muttered criticism was preserved. For the first time, crew members could hear the raw intensity of Meghan's reactions in moments that were never meant to leave the confines of the set. And while the production continued, with cameras rolling and a holiday special being meticulously filmed, the audio was quietly accumulating evidence of a side of the star few had ever heard before. According to insider accounts, there were multiple layers to the frustration captured in the audio. Some of it was procedural, timing issues, missed cues, minor errors that disrupted the flow of filming. Other moments reflected deeper emotional intensity. Impatience, irritation, even anger that seemed disproportionate to the minor infractions occurring on set. Crew members recalled certain lines, moments of tension so charged that they froze in place, unsure how to respond. These recordings were not exaggerated or dramatized. They were real, immediate, and raw. And then came the first unmistakable outburst. One of the production assistants had misplaced a small prop, a tray intended for a dessert segment. It was an easy mistake, common in any production, but the reaction it provoked was anything but ordinary. Meghan's voice rose, sharp and commanding, cutting through the hum of the studio like a sudden clap of thunder. Crew members later described the effect as instantaneous, a collective pause, everyone suddenly hyper-aware of the heightened intensity. The audio captured not only the words but the tone, the cadence, the emotional spikes that the camera could not. This moment, the first real surge of frustration caught on tape, was a turning point. It marked the transition from subtle tension to a more sustained pattern of emotional intensity. Minor irritations were no longer isolated incidents. They became part of a continuous stream of reactions, all meticulously recorded by the hidden devices. Crew members began to realize that the audio was not just a safety measure. It was a document of a day that would later be analyzed, dissected, and, eventually, leaked. The leak itself was a slow, creeping process. At first, only a few insiders knew of the recordings. Discussions were whispered in corners, messages passed discreetly among staff. Some debated whether sharing the audio could have serious consequences, legal repercussions, professional backlash, or even personal threats. Others saw the recordings as irrefutable evidence, a way to corroborate what they had witnessed firsthand. The tension over what to do with the audio mirrored the tension on set. Each decision weighed carefully, each word measured. What added to the drama was the unpredictability of how the audio might eventually be received. Crew members speculated endlessly. Would the public understand the context? Would Meghan's reputation suffer? Or would fans dismiss the recordings as inconsequential, a minor lapse blown out of proportion by jealous staff? These questions hung over the production like a storm cloud, adding an extra layer of stress to an already tense environment. The secret audio also revealed patterns of behavior that were invisible to the cameras. Crew members noted repeated instances of raised voices, pointed criticisms, and sharp directives. Each episode seemed to escalate slightly, a crescendo building over the course of the day. The recordings captured subtle cues, like changes in tone, pacing of speech, and even moments of silence that carried weight. For those listening later, these nuances painted a picture far different from the polished scenes presented to viewers. And yet, the crew continued to work, moving carefully, anticipating reactions, adjusting their behavior to avoid further escalation. There was a delicate balance. Perform the duties expected of them, maintain professionalism, and navigate the unpredictable mood swings of a celebrity under intense scrutiny. The audio devices, silent and unnoticed, continued their work, capturing every nuance of tone, every sharp word, every rise and fall of frustration. By mid-afternoon, it was clear that the recordings were not merely precautionary. They had become a chronicle of events that would define the day. Crew members described reviewing the audio later with a mixture of horror and fascination. What seemed like minor irritations in the moment revealed themselves as a series of escalating reactions, each more intense than the last. The audio preserved not just words, but context, emotional resonance, and the subtle dynamics of authority, control, and tension on set. The emergence of the audio also brought new challenges. Some staff feared the potential legal implications. Others worried about leaks, reputational harm, or backlash from executives. Discussions over the recordings were conducted in hushed tones, always under the shadow of confidentiality agreements and professional obligations. The crew understood the stakes. They had captured something unprecedented, but handling it required extreme caution. And yet, despite the caution, the knowledge of what had been recorded was impossible to ignore. Crew members whispered among themselves, sharing brief clips in private, speculating on the reactions if the audio were to surface. What was captured was not just a moment of frustration. It was a pattern, a series of incidents that, taken together, revealed a side of Meghan Markle that the public had never seen. The recordings had become a mirror, reflecting tension, pressure, and emotional intensity that had otherwise been hidden behind a polished exterior. What makes this even more remarkable is that the audio's existence was not immediately known to executives. For hours, the devices recorded unnoticed, capturing the full arc of frustration, escalation, and emotional response. When the recordings were eventually reviewed, the reactions ranged from disbelief to concern. What had seemed like minor irritations to some staff members during filming now appeared as a significant pattern of behavior, meticulously documented and undeniable. And that's when the true implications began to sink in. The audio was more than just a record of a meltdown. It was a potential game changer. Crew members realized that the content could alter public perception, inform internal investigations, and even influence media narratives. The tension on set had been captured in unfiltered reality, providing evidence of behavior that had previously been invisible to the audience. The secret audio, initially a precautionary measure, had become a critical artifact. It captured moments of tension, frustration, and volatility that no camera could document. And as the day progressed, it became clear that this recording would not remain a private curiosity. The implications were enormous, and the question hanging over the set was unavoidable. What would happen if the audio reached the public? For now, the crew worked in quiet anticipation, balancing professionalism with the growing awareness that what they had captured was extraordinary. The subtle signs of frustration had escalated, the outbursts had become audible, and the recordings had immortalized every sharp word, every clipped instruction, every moment of tension. And yet, The full impact of the audio, what it would reveal, how it would be interpreted, and the consequences it would trigger, was still unfolding. But what came next would take the audio from an internal precaution to a public revelation, and no one on set was prepared for the shockwaves it would unleash. The moment that would define the day, and later, the headlines, arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly, but its impact was instantaneous. 1 second, the cameras were rolling, capturing a cheerful segment with holiday cookies, steaming mugs of cocoa, and the warm glow of set lights reflecting off every surface. The next second, the energy shifted. A simple misstep, a minor error, something that would have gone unnoticed in any ordinary kitchen, became the spark that ignited what insiders have described as an extraordinary outburst. It was a small thing at first. A mixing bowl placed slightly off-center. A spatula not returned to the correct counter. To anyone outside the production, these were insignificant errors, barely worth noticing. But to Meghan, according to multiple crew accounts, they represented a breach of precision, an interruption to the flow she demanded. The first words, sharp and clipped, echoed across the set. Not yet a scream, not yet a full meltdown, but enough to freeze the crew in place. The secret audio captured every nuance. Her tone, initially measured, quickly escalated. Instructions became commands, criticisms punctuated by moments of disbelief and frustration. Every correction was delivered with an intensity that left staff members on edge. Professionals who had worked with high-profile celebrities for decades admitted to being stunned. The behavior, they said, was unrelenting, unpredictable, and far more intense than any minor irritation could justify. What made the outburst particularly shocking was the speed of escalation. 1 minute, Meghan was poised, instructing an assistant on the placement of decorations with a smile that seemed to reassure the team. The next minute, a sharp reprimand cut through the ambient sounds of the set, targeting a seemingly trivial mistake. The rise in tension was instantaneous. Crew members later described feeling as though the ground had shifted beneath them. One moment, they were operating in familiar territory. The next, they were navigating a high-stakes environment where any misstep could provoke another outburst. Insiders recall a series of moments where Meghan's voice rose, the audio picking up syllables punctuated with emotion, frustration, and an intensity that made clear this was no ordinary irritation. The outburst was a combination of verbal sharpness, rapid pacing, and subtle cues that amplified the impact. A raised eyebrow, a pointed hand gesture, a step closer to the assistant. All of these nonverbal signals added weight to the spoken words. It was a complete, multi-layered expression of emotion, recorded in a way that the cameras never could capture. The first real surge of intensity occurred during a segment involving a complex dessert presentation. As the assistant struggled to position a delicate garnish, Meghan's voice reportedly snapped, louder than anything heard before on set. Crew members described the effect as instantaneous, a collective intake of breath, sudden silence, and a palpable shift in the room's energy. This was no longer a minor irritation. This was a peak moment, a fully fledged emotional eruption that would later dominate discussion around the production. What's remarkable about this alleged outburst is the duality captured in the audio. Meghan could alternate between sharp, critical commands and sudden moments of calm or encouragement. 1 second, a reprimand. The next, a quick note of approval or instruction to continue. Crew members described it as a roller coaster, an unpredictable environment where every action, every word, could trigger a response that varied widely in intensity. The unpredictability heightened the tension, making the audio all the more compelling when reviewed later. For the crew, it was not just the words themselves, but the emotional resonance that was striking. The audio captured the subtle undertones of frustration, impatience, and, at times, what could only be described as disbelief. These weren't rehearsed lines, not moments of performance. They were real, raw reactions, human responses to perceived errors, amplified by the pressures of production and the high standards demanded on set. Witnesses later noted that the outburst extended over multiple takes. Each repetition of the scene seemed to escalate the tension, each minor deviation met with sharper language and more pronounced gestures. The audio devices, discreetly recording from hidden locations, captured this cumulative effect in real time. Listeners could hear the ebb and flow, the peaks and valleys of emotion, the way frustration compounded over time. Interestingly, the outburst also revealed a dimension of Meghan's management style that crew members found both compelling and challenging. Her expectations were precise, meticulous, and unwavering. Errors, even small ones, were magnified. And yet, in moments of clarity, she could pivot to constructive guidance, almost as if apologizing for the intensity of her initial reaction. This unpredictability made the recordings not just shocking, but fascinating. A study in human behavior under pressure, a window into the complex dynamics of a high-stakes production. As the day progressed, the outburst reportedly reached multiple peaks. Crew members described moments where voices nearly collided, gestures became more pronounced, and the atmosphere thickened with tension. The secret audio picked up every subtle inflection, every tonal shift, every second of frustration that might have gone unnoticed by anyone not directly involved. To hear it later was to experience the intensity anew. The room seemed to crackle with a nervous energy that was impossible to capture visually, but preserved perfectly in sound. One of the most revealing aspects of the audio was how it highlighted contrasts between public persona and private behavior. Meghan, known for her calm, composed public appearances, demonstrated on set a level of emotional volatility that few had expected. The recordings provided undeniable evidence that her behavior behind the scenes was a world apart from the polished performance the audience sees on camera. And it wasn't just intensity. It was sustained, layered, and increasingly sharp as the day progressed. Crew members described attempts to manage the situation delicately. Some whispered instructions to each other, trying to minimize triggers. Others took a step back, waiting for the intensity to pass. And all the while, the recording devices captured everything. Each syllable, each tonal shift, each rising pitch became part of a record that would later reveal the depth and complexity of the meltdown. Observers later noted that this outburst wasn't a single moment, but a series of escalating incidents. Minor errors, compounding frustration, and high expectations created a feedback loop, each element feeding into the next. By the time the scene was completed, the audio had documented a full arc, the initial spark of irritation, the peak of verbal intensity, the oscillations of emotion, and finally, the gradual tapering of tension as filming continued. And then came the moment that truly shocked the crew. Meghan, frustrated with yet another small error, allegedly delivered a verbal tirade that went beyond clipped commands and raised tones. Words that conveyed exasperation, disbelief, and impatience filled the room, captured only by the hidden audio devices. Crew members, who had grown accustomed to navigating small incidents, were stunned. Some admitted they had never experienced anything like it in decades of production work. The audio preserved not just the words but the emotional cadence, the pauses, the sudden bursts of energy that left the room electrified with tension. What made this even more extraordinary was how contained the cameras made everything appear. The audience watching the holiday special would see a polished performance, a cheerful scene, a composed host sharing holiday recipes and stories. But behind the lens, behind the carefully curated frames, the audio recorded an entirely different narrative, one of frustration, intensity, and emotional volatility. This contrast would later become a focal point in discussions about the production, the star, and the nature of celebrity behavior under pressure. As the day drew on, the outburst continued in waves, each escalation slightly more intense than the last. Crew members navigated the storm with professionalism, but privately, they admitted to being shaken. The audio devices, silent and unobtrusive, captured the full spectrum. The sharp reprimands, the exasperated tones, the rapid pacing of speech, and even moments of apparent reflection and recalibration. It was a complete record, a chronicle of a day that none on set would forget. And the implications were profound. The audio was more than just documentation, it was evidence. Evidence of behavior that contrasted sharply with public perception, evidence that would later shock viewers, reporters, and fans alike. It was the moment when subtle frustration became unmistakable intensity, when private behavior clashed dramatically with the curated public image. But just when crew members thought the day had reached its peak, just when they believed the worst had passed, the audio captured something that none of them expected. An escalation so sharp, so charged, that it would leave everyone on set questioning what they thought they knew, and set the stage for revelations that would dominate conversations for weeks to come. The meltdown had begun, and what came next would go far beyond frustration. It would redefine everything the crew, Netflix executives, and the public thought they knew about the making of this holiday special. The moment Meghan's voice first erupted across the set, the energy in the room shifted instantly. What had begun as a subtle, almost imperceptible frustration escalated into something palpable, a force that seemed to ripple through the crew. For a few seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The holiday set, with its twinkling lights and festive aroma, suddenly felt like a different world, a world where tension overshadowed cheer, where fear and disbelief replaced laughter and excitement. Crew members described the immediate reactions in a mixture of shock and apprehension. Some froze, unsure how to respond, their minds racing through a mental checklist. What can I do to avoid escalating this further? How should I move? What tone should I use when speaking? Even the most seasoned assistants, those who had worked with high-profile personalities for decades, admitted later that this was unlike anything they had encountered before. They had prepared for minor diva moments, for small bursts of irritation, but this was something entirely different, something more intense, more unpredictable, more raw. One assistant recalled gripping the edge of the counter, heart pounding, watching every movement of Meghan as she navigated the kitchen set. Her eyes flashed with exasperation at a misplaced utensil, her voice raised just enough to make everyone in the vicinity flinch. The audio devices hidden across the set captured it all. The sharp intonations, the sudden pauses, the emotional spikes that punctuated every word. Listening to it later, that assistant said, felt like reliving the scene in slow motion. The fear, the adrenaline, the unspoken anxiety of trying to navigate an environment where the rules seemed to shift moment by moment. Others reacted differently, trying to manage the situation with calm professionalism. They whispered instructions, adjusted props quickly, attempted to anticipate the next movement or command. Every small gesture was calculated to avoid triggering further frustration. But the unpredictability made this incredibly difficult. Crew members never knew when a slight misstep, a whisk placed incorrectly, a napkin unfolded at the wrong angle, a camera positioned a millimeter off, might provoke a reaction that escalated beyond a mere reprimand. Some crew members resorted to humor as a coping mechanism, exchanging nervous glances, offering quiet, sardonic commentary to one another when they thought no one was listening. It was a fragile balance between maintaining professionalism and preserving one's sanity. The tension, captured in the secret audio, wasn't just in the words. It was in the pauses, the tonal shifts, the almost imperceptible changes in breathing that revealed the emotional load carried by everyone on set. Fear and uncertainty were heightened by the knowledge that everything was being documented, albeit secretly. Some crew members knew the audio devices were recording, and this added another layer of complexity. Every reaction, every whispered conversation, every hesitant step had to account for the possibility that it could be heard later, dissected, or even leaked. The presence of the recordings created both relief and anxiety. Relief that there was a record if accountability became necessary, and anxiety about what could happen if the recordings ever surfaced. The director, a veteran of countless productions, was reportedly stunned by the intensity. He attempted to maintain control, issuing calm, measured instructions while trying to defuse moments of tension. Yet, even he admitted later that the volatility of the situation was unlike anything he had previously encountered. Crew members described how he moved tactically around the set, positioning himself to anticipate conflict, ready to intervene, but careful not to provoke further escalation. The audio captured these subtle interventions, the quiet words of reassurance, the whispered attempts at calming nerves that were invisible to the cameras, but audible to anyone listening later. Other members of the crew took a more passive approach, stepping back, observing, and waiting for the intensity to subside. They watched in disbelief as small errors became triggers for sharp instructions, as minor frustrations escalated into extended moments of verbal tension. For many, it was a lesson in restraint, patience, and navigating human behavior under pressure. The secret audio would later confirm the extent of these interactions, revealing how crew members adapted to, mitigated, and sometimes endured the emotional volatility that unfolded in real time. Some moments captured in the recordings were particularly chilling. A crew member recalled one incident where a misaligned plate led to a rapid series of sharp instructions. The volume, tone, and cadence of Meghan's words created a sense of immediate urgency, a need for instant correction. Crew members described feeling frozen, caught between the instinct to act and the fear of making the situation worse. The secret audio, playing back these sequences, made clear just how high the emotional stakes were on set, stakes that the public, watching the polished footage, could never perceive. As the day continued, the crew's reactions evolved. Initial shock gave way to heightened alertness, a constant state of anticipation. They began to read cues in Meghan's body language, how she moved, where her eyes landed, the tilt of her head, the speed of her gestures. They adjusted their movements, preempted her commands, and communicated subtly among themselves to prevent further escalations. Every step was measured, every word chosen carefully, every movement calculated to avoid triggering additional frustration. Some crew members admitted later that the day felt surreal, almost cinematic in its intensity. The combination of the meticulously crafted holiday set, the polished camera angles, and the unexpected volatility created a striking contrast. To the viewer, it looked like a flawless production. To those on the set, it was a high-stakes emotional minefield, a place where any misstep could ignite another wave of verbal intensity. The secret audio preserved all of it: the rising tones, the clipped commands, the sudden bursts of exasperation that seemed to sweep across the set like a storm. Interestingly, the audio also captured moments of vulnerability. Amid the frustration and intensity, there were brief pauses, subtle changes in tone, moments where Meghan's voice seemed to soften, to recalibrate, to acknowledge the efforts of the crew. These micro-moments were fleeting, almost imperceptible in real time, but they revealed complexity. The audio preserved this nuance, showing that the outbursts were not one-dimensional, but a layered expression of emotion, pressure, and the high standards demanded on set. The crew's reactions were equally layered. They were simultaneously fearful, cautious, curious, and, at times, amused. Some whispered nervously, sharing tentative observations. Others steered clear, focusing on technical tasks, trying not to draw attention. And yet, all of them were aware of a growing, almost electric tension that pervaded the set. The audio recordings captured both sides of this dynamic: the volatility of the star and the cautious, calculated responses of the crew. By mid-afternoon, the room had transformed. The holiday cheer intended for the camera was overshadowed by a pervasive sense of anticipation and unease. Crew members were hyper-aware of every sound, every movement, every shift in energy. They adapted constantly, but the unpredictability of the outbursts made every action potentially significant. The audio, still recording silently, captured it all. A living document of tension, frustration, and fear that would later offer the public a rare glimpse behind the polished production. And then, as if on cue, the intensity reached a crescendo. One small error, one misplaced prop, ignited a reaction that left everyone frozen. The secret audio captured it: the sharp words, the rising voice, the cadence of frustration, the physical gestures that punctuated every phrase. Crew members later admitted feeling stunned, uncertain how to proceed, and anxious about the long-term implications. For them, it wasn't just a professional challenge. It was an emotional test, a live demonstration of navigating unpredictability under pressure. But what came next would push the boundaries of shock and disbelief even further. The crew had only seen the first layer of the meltdown. The audio hinted at deeper intensity, moments that no one had anticipated, and a crescendo of behavior that would ultimately leave both crew and viewers stunned. The cameras continued to roll, capturing a seemingly flawless holiday special: twinkling lights, pristine tables, steaming mugs, and Meghan Markle smiling as she guided the audience through recipes designed to inspire festive joy. But off-camera, behind the polished veneer, the set had become a stage for tension, miscommunication, and conflicts that were escalating in ways no one anticipated. Every corner of the production was fraught with hidden battles, conflicts between crew members, conflicts between instructions and expectations, and, most importantly, conflicts between the star and her team. The first layer of tension was procedural. Each department, lighting, sound, set design, camera, had specific responsibilities, all carefully timed to ensure continuity and production quality. Minor delays, a misplaced light, a mic slightly out of position, or a prop not aligned perfectly could ripple across departments. Normally, these issues were addressed with a calm correction or a brief pause. On this day, however, Meghan's increasing frustration amplified even the smallest procedural hiccups in high-stakes moments. The secret audio, captured by crew members, recorded every sharp instruction, every clipped remark, and every subtle exasperation that no camera lens could capture. What made these conflicts particularly complicated was the dynamic of hierarchy on set. Meghan, as both star and creative force, held considerable authority. But she was also operating under the watchful eye of directors, producers, and Netflix executives who had their own vision for the show. Crew members, caught between these overlapping directives, found themselves in a constant state of recalibration. Every action had to account for potential reactions from multiple authority figures. One wrong move could trigger frustration from Meghan, correction from the director, or an urgent instruction from the producers. It was a delicate, almost impossible balancing act.